Good to be here in Dallas again this morning, the feast of St. Ephrem of Syria. And the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, amen. Today, a few considerations on the virtue of prudence. You know, in our crisis in the society, as we Pius X in the course of this last year, we've had much speaking about things that are matters of prudence. But St. Thomas Aquinas talks about the virtue of prudence in the Summa Theologica, the greatest work. St. Thomas says that prudence is the queen of the virtues, the moral virtues, but it is a virtue that guides all things to the end. All human actions, says St. Thomas, are for an end. They're for a purpose. The stomach wants to be filled. It wants to be filled, and for that purpose, it wants food. And so a very prudent thing to do is to go shopping. And you go shopping and you buy food. It's not very prudent to go out and buy poison. You go and buy food. And then it's also prudent to buy a stove. It's prudent also, if you want to eat, to have plates and to have utensils. And in fact, if you think about all the things you need to do in order to eat breakfast, there are a lot of things involved. There are many prudent decisions that must be made. And those that lead you towards breakfast, those are prudent action. And those that lead you towards starvation or lead you towards poison and death, these are imprudent acts. Prudence is the virtue that guides. It is an intellectual virtue in the mind, and it looks over all of our actions in relation to the end. The principle of prudence can be applied in omnibus respice finem. That's what the saints tell us all the time. In omnibus respice finem. In all things look to the end. When we look to the end, it solves many problems. For instance, a wife, my mother used to tell me this many times, that many women are wondering why their husbands aren't nice to them, or why they have difficulties with their husbands. And they say, I want my husband to love me. It's so important. I want my husband to love me. And so when the husband comes home, why are you late? What are you doing here? Why are you late? What were you doing? Blah, 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 blah. They do this, do that. You didn't say this, you didn't say that. And you scream at the husband, say all the things that you need to do this, you need to do that. And then the husband isn't nice. I don't understand. I want him to love me. Well, the fact is that if you want the husband to love you, then you need to do lovable things. And so prudence will guide you to act in such a way that you will be lovable. If you want to be loved, prudence will guide you to act in such a way to be lovable. Now, prudence can be applied to anything that has an end, says St. Thomas. So any actions, all actions have an end. All actions have a purpose. Everything you do has a purpose. Ultimately, the purpose of every action is happiness. Since prudence can be applied to any action towards any end, there can be good prudence and there can be wicked prudence. There can be supernatural prudence and there can be natural prudence. Prudence is said to be prudent, which is an action which moves me in the direction towards my end. And we can have many ends. We choose those ends. Many people, their end is pleasure. Their end is advancement, ambition. Their end is money. Or their end is God. Or there are intermediate ends also. Like, for instance, a priest who wants to save a soul. He wants to help a soul. I want this soul to go to heaven. And so you meet the soul and you find out that the soul is in the state of sin. Or the soul is not perfect. And so you say to the soul, you are rotten, no good for nothing, you're going to hell. Whack, 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 whack. Next thing you know, the soul leaves. And it doesn't achieve its end. Other times, sometimes you must spank. Sometimes you must be quiet. Sometimes you must encourage. What guides us in the encouragement? Whichever thing is going to achieve the end. So a parent who is prudent wants his child to grow up a man of virtue. He wants his child to grow up a good Catholic. He wants his child to grow up and become a saint. And so sometimes he will spank the child. And sometimes he will not spank the child. Just like when you have a wound, If you have a broken leg, you have to violently take it and you have to set it and let the child scream. But if you have a cut, you don't take it and say, let's see how big that cut is. Oh, it's really big in there. You don't do that. What you have to do is very gently touch the cut and very gently heal the cut. So it depends on the type of wound. And if there's poison inside, you must suck out the poison. And so Prudence will dictate what is going to make this child healthy, what is going to guide this child to heaven. And sometimes the virtuous thing to do will be to spank the child. Sometimes it will not be to spank the child. But we'll always be looking, Prudence will be that virtue that guides us to our end. Now every man is governed by a kind of prudence. No man can live without prudence. But most follow what St. Thomas calls the prudence of the flesh. It is a simple way of describing all the sinful prudences. The prudence of the flesh. And this is the prudence of most men. It is called the prudence of comfort. Not a technical term for it, we're just calling it the prudence of comfort. And that is, we want to be in comfort. We want to be in peace. And so very often, if you are standing in a room, and there is a man with a gun, and he says, everyone be quiet, and you say, you can't tell me what to do. Someone will tell you, that's not prudent. It's not prudent to say that because he might blow your brains out. In the sense you want to be healthy throughout the entirety of the day, and a bullet going through your head is going to be bad for your health, won't make you go through a healthy day. Therefore, it is imprudent to say to an angry man with a gun, be quiet, or something offensive. And so prudence guides the actions towards an end. There are many kinds of ends. And what is prudence, says St. Thomas, depends upon our end. And he gives an example. Natural prudence and supernatural prudence. If we are following natural prudence, and we come before a king, and the king says to you, burn incense before this idol. Now, according to natural prudence, we don't want to die. We don't want to be tortured. We don't want to be killed. We don't want to have a punishment, whichever punishment the emperor or the king wants for us for burning if we don't burn incense before the idol. Or if the king comes and says, I want you to tell a lie, just a small lie. Well, if you tell this little lie, then you will be fine and you will receive the blessings of the church. An example of this, a better example, is the example of Joan of Arc, where Joan of Arc was asked to tell a lie. She was not asked to preach heresy. She was not asked to deny the Catholic faith. She was only asked to lie, and it was not a lie that seemed to affect others, for no one saw or heard the visions that she saw or heard from St. Michael and St. Catherine and so on, the saints that appeared to her. And so she was asked to tell a lie. Now, what was the prudent thing to do? According to natural prudence, she should say, I don't mean to lie. I will simulate. I will sign the paper. And then I will be alive. And then I can always go to confession. And then, of course, afterwards, I will be able to live at peace amongst my people. And I have a young girl and have many more years to live, and will be able to talk about the miracles. And maybe when the situation is better, and the king's situation is better, we'll be able to help the king to fight wars again. There are so many things that can be done if we only do this. And besides, it is the priests that tell me that I must lie. It is the bishop that tells me that I must lie. It is the church that tells me that I must lie. And so maybe I need to lie because perhaps I have too much pride. And I really believe that I saw these visions, and I really believe that I heard them, when maybe I didn't. If I think about it carefully, maybe I didn't. And therefore, natural prudence will guide her to sign the paper, which she did. She signed the recantation. Now, this was a naturally prudent thing to do in order to maintain her health. But supernatural prudence will say a different thing. And St. Thomas says, supernatural prudence tells the martyr, it is not prudent. And here is the example of the supernatural prudence. We find it in the book of Daniel, where Susanna follows supernatural prudence. She is given a similar choice to Joan of Arc. And Susanna is told by the two judges, remember the story of Susanna, that the two judges came to Susanna And she was very beautiful. And they wanted to commit adultery with her. And they were the judges of the people. And they found Susanna alone in the garden. And they said, Susanna, you will commit adultery with us. And if you do not, we will say that there was a young man with you. And we will tell the people that there was a young man with you. And not only are we the judges, but we were also the witnesses. And therefore you will be put to death. And Susanna said these words, if I do this thing, I shall not escape your hands. Or excuse me, if I do this thing, it is death to me. But if I do it not, I shall not escape your hands. If I do this thing, it is death to me. If I do it not, I shall escape your hands. This is supernatural prudence. And St. Thomas explains, if I do this thing, it is death to me. If I do this thing, if I commit this sin, it is death to me. Why? Because Susanna was pure. Susanna was a perfect wife. Susanna was filled with the love of God in her soul. And Susanna did not want to sin. And therefore she said, if I do this thing, it is death to me. Because her soul would be dead. If I do it not, I shall not escape your hands. She did not say, if I do it not, I'm going to die. Because she knew that if she did it not, they were going to put her to death. But the death of the body did not concern her. And this is supernatural prudence. St. Thomas Aquinas says, the most prudent thing that a martyr can do is be martyred. And the most imprudent thing that a martyr can do is to avoid martyrdom. That the prudence is that virtue that guides us in our every action towards our end. And what is the end of the Catholic? The end of the Catholic is heaven. The end of the Catholic is to see God face to face. And we know that if we die a martyr, we go straight to heaven, and we don't have to go through the trouble of purgatory. We go straight to God. We also know that when we die a martyr, that we are imitating Jesus Christ and dying like He died. And that there is no more glorious death than the death of the martyr. And that is the reason why the 3 Carthusians that St. Thomas More watched go to their death in London. He was talking to his daughter Meg in the Tower of London. And they were looking outside of the tower and saw 3 Carthusian priests. And the English dragged them about a mile away to the Tyburn tree to be hung, drawn, and quartered. Hung up by their necks very slowly so they wouldn't die, suffocate them, then drop them before they die, and then take a sword, cut out their guts, and pull their stomach out of their body and show them to the face, and then cut them in pieces, to be hung, to be drawn, and quartered. And they were on their way to be hung, drawn, and quartered, being dragged by their feet, by the horses, laying down on the ground, being dragged by their feet, by the horses to the place of martyrdom. And they were singing, and they were filled with joy. And St. Thomas More said to his daughter, you see, Meg, it is not so bad. Look at those 3 Carthusians. They are so happy. They sing with joy. And they go to their death as if they are going to their wedding. They were very prudent men, says St. Thomas. They were filled with prudence because they knew they were going to victory, and they knew that they were going to the place of heaven, and therefore they were so happy that they were being dragged to the place of martyrdom, and the joy was filled, they were filled with joy. Another Benedictine monk in the French Revolution. He was going to be killed. He said, before I am killed, before you kill me, can I say a few words and sing a song to my mother? And they said, all right. And so he turned to the statue of Mary that was in the monastery, that was in the courtyard of the monastery, where the monks used to walk by all the time, and he sang, Salve Regina. And when he sang Salve Regina, he began to sing the Salve Regina, and they were so angry, hearing him sing the Salve Regina, and they killed him immediately. These are prudent men. These are men that know that all the purpose of every action is to go to God. And this prudence is related to faith. We learn in the new teaching of the Society of St. Pius X that prudence is not related to faith. There's prudential truths, and then there's speculative truths. Speculative truths are things that the way they are, things that are the way they are. But prudential truths can change according to the circumstances, and we have to be prudent. Yes, indeed, we must be prudent. But St. Thomas asks, what kind of prudence? Is it a prudence of the flesh? It is a prudence that says, and by the choices we make, we can learn the kind of prudence that we have. Prudence guides us in our choices, and all of us follow a kind of prudence. It shall be the prudence of the flesh, or it shall be natural prudence, or it shall be supernatural prudence. But all of us are going to be guided by the virtue of prudence. Whether it be the good one or the bad one. And we can look into the soul. What prudence guides? What is the intellectual virtue? What is the intellectual virtue that guides this man in his decisions? We find that one of the great miracles of the Holy Communion, the boy we mentioned many times, a boy that was living a wicked life, a boy that was, his father was a thief about 1,000 years ago in Europe. His father was a thief in Italy. His father was a criminal. And he would watch and help his father in stealing. And he was a bad boy. But one day his fellow boys went in to a mass. And so he went with them. And he sat in the back of the church. And he sat in the back of the church. And the priest gave the sermon. And the priest was there. It was a weekday mass. The boys were having some kind of altar server meeting or whatever it was. And there was this bad boy in the back of the church. And the priest said, what is he doing here? And he sat in the back of the church, because he was there stuck with his friends. And so the priest decided to preach a sermon. And he said, when you grab on to Jesus Christ, whom you will receive in Holy Communion, this day, maybe it was the day of their solemn communion, never let go. Whenever you commit a sin, you let go of Christ. Never let go. And then the boys came up to communion. And finally, at the end, that bad boy came to communion. And he was so known to be a bad boy that the priest was not going to give him Holy Communion. He says, this boy is very bad. And last time I saw him to church, I don't know the last time I saw him in church. I don't know if he ever been to confession. But did he remember the teaching of our Lord? That unless a man is a public sinner, if he eats unworthy, let him eat. And said, oh, it's in this. So he gave him Holy Communion. Later that day, the boy was out. And his father decided to rob a store, to rob a house. And he went to the house. He said, all right, son, you watch for the police. You sit here and watch for the police, and I'm going to go in and rob this place. And he said, I can't do that, Father. He goes, why not? You do it every day. What's the problem? He said, I went to the church this morning. What did you do go to the church this morning? I went to the church this morning, and I listened to the priest, and I received Holy Communion. And he said, if I sin, I cannot let go of Jesus. And if I sin, I let go of him. And I received him this morning, and I can't let go. And the father became so angry that he didn't rob the house. He beat his son to death. He beat him and beat him and beat him and left him half dead on the ground. And then he left. And they found the boy dying there on the ground. And so they went and got the priest. And the priest came and said, what happened? And the boy, before he died, said, Father, I did not let go of Jesus. You told me to not let go. I didn't let go. That is prudence. We do not understand anything anymore from the supernatural perspective. And this boy was forgiven his sins. And this boy did not let go. And this boy went straight to heaven, who had lived a wicked life. And so likewise, look at the prudence of the good thief. His prudence was less than that boy. All the good thief did, when he was hanging on the cross, what did the good thief do? He died anyway. He was at his death anyway. But what did he do? He said, this man has done no wrong. He defended Jesus Christ when no one else would defend him. On Good Friday, there was only one man that defended Jesus Christ. There was only one man that said to all the crowd, this man has done no wrong. And it wasn't St. Peter. And it wasn't St. John. And it wasn't any of the apostles. They were cowards. It was a thief and a murderer who was justly deserving his death. A thief and a murderer who in the beginning of that day cursed Jesus Christ just like the bad thief. He mocked Jesus Christ just like the bad thief. But then he changed, and he said, this man has done no wrong. And then he asked Christ, which is a very imprudent thing to do, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. When you consider the situation, there are wise times to ask questions, there are prudent times to ask questions, and there are imprudent times. As we mentioned also, sometimes our Lord is hanging on the cross. He is scourged. He is crowned with thorns. He is abandoned by his apostles. He is near death. Lord, can you remember me? Can you do me a favor? He should say, really, I'm sorry, but this is really not a good day. Why don't you ask me, last week when I was popular? This isn't a good day, I'm sorry. But for our Lord doesn't believe it's not a good day. And here St. Ambrose also tells us that when Christ gives gifts, when Christ pours out his gifts, what happens? The people come and ask for more. And we have the example of St. Augustine. St. Augustine was dying. St. Augustine was lying on his bed and he was dying. And they came to Augustine and they said, Augustine, you cannot leave us. You must continue to live. And then St. Augustine said, okay, how long should I live? A little longer. He says, you think I should live until the end of the world? And they said, well, you can't live into the world. And he goes, okay, then that means I have to die, right? He goes, yes, well, then why not now? He said, you can't die now. We need you. He goes, oh, I'm sorry, but if I can't live into the world and I have to die, why? What's so special about tomorrow? Why not today? And then finally, another man that was dying was brought in to Augustine. And there was a man that was dying. They wheeled him into the bed of Augustine where St. Augustine was dying. And they said, Augustine, I'm dying. He goes, yeah, I'm dying too. He goes, Augustine, save me. He goes, well, don't you think if I could save you, I would save myself? And the man said, don't change the subject. I don't care about you dying. You have to save me before you die, because after you die, you can't do any more miracles. So save me now. And he said, but if I could save you, I would save myself. And he says, no, I don't care if you're dying. You must save me. And he said, all right, I save you. And so the man did not die, but Augustine died. He let the man live because the man wanted life in this world. He let himself die because he wanted life in the next. What is the most prudent thing? In the story of Blessed Emerenciana, Margaret of Castello. Margaret of Castello was born blind. Margaret of Castello was crippled. Margaret of Castello was ugly. And she was the daughter of a great nobleman who was very proud. And his wife was more proud than he. And when Margaret was born, they saw this ugly, repulsive baby. And they wanted to kill her, but they couldn't kill their own baby. So they took a trusted servant and they put her up on the top of the castle. And they left her there alone. And they told everyone the baby died. Finally, when the baby was 5 years old, she wandered out in the castle, and they saw the ugly baby and threw her out. And the mother took the baby back. And they said, wait a minute. She hates everybody. She would only take that baby back if it was her baby. Is that your baby? Then she finally had to admit that it was her baby. Margaret would die at the age of 33. She would eventually be abandoned by her mother. And she could perform miracles every day. She was always filled with happiness. But one day there was a girl that was blind, just like Margaret. That girl came to Margaret. Margaret said to her, I give you two choices. I can cure your blindness, and you can live a life in which you will be moderately happy, but you will not die very happy. Or I can give you a greater blessing. I can keep you blind. And I will allow you to stay blind, but if you agree to stay blind, you will know happiness that is so great in this life that you can never compare any other happiness, and then you will be the most happy when you die. And the girl thought about it. She came back and said, I want to see. I don't want to be blind. And she tried to convince her. It is so much better. You'll be so much happier if you are blind. And she said, no, Margaret, I want to be able to see. You cure so many people. Can you please cure me? And so she cured her. But Margaret gave her a choice. He gave her a choice. What was the most prudent thing to do? And what was a lesser thing to do? this virtue of prudence must be properly understood. Sometimes, to violate supernatural prudence is a mortal sin, such as the case of the martyr. Sometimes, to go for the lesser prudence weakens our souls, such as the case of that girl of Margaret. And so, we must understand the virtue of prudence. What is the most prudent thing to do in our crisis? We will imitate the thief. We must imitate the thief, for Jesus Christ is being crucified right now in the church. And we must imitate the thief. And all we have to do is say, this man has done no wrong. This day wilt thou remember me in paradise. And that is the most prudent thing to do. Even if our Lord is not in a position to help us, He still will. Prudence demands that we speak the truth. Prudence demands that we be ready for martyrdom. Prudence demands that we guide all our actions towards sanctity, and we guide all our actions toward God. And this means all our actions must be enlightened by faith. Are enlightened when we act according to the space of specie eternitatis, under the aspect of eternity. It means our actions must be enlightened by faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, we don't know what to do when you get up in the morning. Why do you roll out of bed and say, good morning, Lord, and then you get up and start cursing everybody? Because you know that your day is the most to be dedicated to God. And therefore, the first thing you do is offer the day to God. Why do we say our rosary? Because we must remind ourselves of the mysteries of our faith. And why do we say our rosaries in the house? Because the mysteries of faith must be in our house. Why do we say the rosary with our whole family? Because the mystery of faith must be in our whole family. It is a very prudent way to act. No prudent act can be done unless it is illustrated by faith. And it is foolishness, it is falsity, it is ignorance of the faith that makes someone say that there are prudential truths and then there are supernatural truths. And prudential things are related to daily acts, and that depends on the guidance of the Holy Superior. Whereas there are matters of faith, and that, of course, we don't touch. That is cutting and dividing. That division is not from God. Prudence demands that we do what we're doing. Prudence demands that we guide our every action towards heaven. Prudence demands that we be ready for martyrdom. Prudence demands that we follow, that we direct all our actions according to the directions of our Holy Mother, who said, do whatever she tells you. And like we mentioned on Sunday, also to listen to our Lord, who said, do whatever she tells you. And that is what Christ is saying to us today. When we wake up Christ on the boat, as our boat of the church is perishing, Lord save us, we're perishing, and our Lord will wake up. And He says, do whatever she tells you. She told us to say the rosary. She told the Pope to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. How is that going to fix the problem in the schools? How is that going to fix the problem of modern armies? How is that going to fix the problem of all your metadata being stored in computers in Alaska? How is that going to solve the problem of HARP? How is that going to solve the problem of the contrails going across the sky? How is it going to solve all these problems? And the Pope stands up and says, I consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in union with all the bishops throughout the world. I don't know how it's going to solve it, but I know it is. Because our Mother tells us the truth, and we believe her. And she can only tell us the truth, and she's pretty good at fixing the problem of contrails. And she's pretty good at fixing the problem of HARP. She's pretty good at fixing the problem of all the metadata that they have stored on us. Their metadata will break down, but Christ's metadata never will. He has an information, and our angels have information of every act that we've ever done. And so does the devil. He's got information of every act we've ever done. We better make sure we're on the good side. And then God will bless us. So ask Our Lady to teach us what real prudence is in our times. And let us be guided by supernatural prudence and not by the prudence of the flesh. God bless you all in the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.